Chapter 6, the most important chapter. You see what I did there? Hardness. Okay, so this chapter we are going to focus on how to tell how hard a rock is. This is very important when it comes to identification because a lot of identifiers are based on the hardness or lack thereof of a rock. The difference between a jasperoid and jasper is hardness. Rocks are hard for a variety of reasons. Usually it's because of how well their crystal structure interlocks, or if they even have a crystal. That's why opal, which is glass and water, silica and water, is not nearly as hard and as durable as chalcedony, even though it's pretty much made of the same stuff. See, opal has no crystal structure. It's little spheres that are on top of themselves. Sometimes when they're the same size, then you get that pretty opalescence and that precious opal fire. But even in common opal, it's still just spheres, no crystals. And so that's why it has that very glassy look and it breaks like glass, is that it's just like glass, there's no crystals. Also, some types of rocks just tend to be harder than others. A lot of metamorphic rocks tend to be harder than sedimentary rocks. Volcanic rocks are all over the board. But hardness can also help tell us the story of where the rock came from and why it's there now. Okay, here's another tool list because we can't get enough of those. So to test hardness, we need, and I think we went over this in chapter 1, your fingernail. A pure copper penny, good luck with that, or testing little copper doohickey. I made this one, and I'm thinking about making this part of the free gift package if you buy the physical book by Halloween. A cheapo depot pocket knife, a steel nail, or I have a deck screw. The whole point is that you're looking for a mild regular steel, not fancy steel. A glass plate that you do not mind scratching up. A masonry bit, specifically with a carbide tip. Your choice of handy-dandy rock identification books. I recommend this one. It's a good one. It's been a good one since I was a little kid. Stayed a good one. Eye protection, if you don't already wear spectacles. If you do wear spectacles, make sure these are shatter resistant. And fancy-pancy Mohs Scale of Hardness testers, which, unless we're like doing this for a job and not just for hobby, we don't need them. They're very expensive. We can make our own homemade kit by having a quartz crystal that has a pointy bit on it so that you can try to scratch things with it. A topaz crystal, also that has a pointy bit that we can try to scratch things with it. And a sapphire. Boom. And it must be inspected to make sure it's whole and that it has a good pointy bit for scratching. Which brings us to the difference between this ruby crystals and this sapphire crystal. So these ruby crystals have been broken and they've been kind of healed together. So they might not be actually as hard as corundum because of these fractures. And you can see the fractures better on the unpolished side. Whereas this is a whole sapphire crystal, and so it's not going to have the weaknesses of the fractures in the crystal. So when you pick your testy crystal, you might want to have a flat one like this for scratching, trying to scratch. But you definitely want one of these whole crystals in order to try to scratch. These are not necessary. These are just like rounding out your kit. And a jeweler's loop. I'm going to use this standard one, but you can use an LED one or a standard jeweler's loop. This one is 30 magnification. I recommend no less than 10, but you should probably go like 20 or 30 if you really want to see what you're doing. Alright, if you were paying attention in the last chapter about luster, you'll recognize this rock and you'll have documented its luster on your handy dandy worksheet that comes with your book and your ebook. There's a spot for it. Anyways, now we're going to document everything we can about its hardness. So we're going to start soft. What does that mean? We start with the softest thing that we can test with. So being that gypsum or drywall is softer than my fingernail, I'm going to just demonstrate that for you real quick. But this is our first specimen. Now I know that this is gypsum because I took it for the paint sample. On the back side, I have my gypsum here. It is a 2 on the Mohs scale hardness, and a fingernail is a 2.5. So I should, oh, yep, it's snowing. I should be able to scratch that just fine. So if this was our specimen, I would document scratches with a fingernail. Creates a powder. Those are the types of things you want to document. So we are going to start with, this is specimen A. So can I scratch it with a fingernail? Now I see some stuff coming off of it, but that could be loose crystal shards. I'm gonna give it hell here. Okay, now I'm gonna look at it under my magnifying loop. And I see that I have filed my fingernail onto this rock. So it is definitely harder than a 2.5. Oh look, yeah, it's raggy daggy now. I'm gonna have to take care of that. That's gonna bug me. So the fingernail did not work, so it is harder than a 2.5. So now where do we go? Alright, copper. Scratchy, scratchy, scratch, scratchy, scratchy, scratch. Okay, now let's take a look. Did I leave copper behind, or did I scratch it? Oh yeah, there's chunks of copper on there. Now we always want to make sure we do this on a clean surface. So sometimes you'll want to try it on multiple sides. So I'm going to take our copper scratch it tool, 3.5. And it looks like I'm doing something, but what? I am leaving copper behind. Yep. And you can also look at like what the dust is that's on your hands, and mine is all metallic, so I'm scratching off little bits of copper. So our specimen is harder than copper. What's next? Steel. So we go up the ladder. Here's an example of a stone that won't scratch with your fingernail, a 2.5. Calcite. Let's take a look. No, I did not scratch it. But it will scratch with copper, which is a 3.5. Oh yeah, you can see the scratches on there. Oh yeah, that definitely dug in. Calcite's a 3 on the Mohs scale of hardness. So that, if we were suspecting that, is this an agate or is this calcite? Because we can scratch it, definitely calcite. You guys, I'm gonna totally own up. There's an error in my book in the hardness section where I refer to copper as a 2.5. I'm so sorry. The editing of like 5 people missed that, but it happens. So I just want to let you know, copper is a 3.5, your fingernail is the 2.5. Thanks for hanging in there with me with my first publication. So we're gonna test for steel. So let's try it. Oh my. Oh, that is damaging. Oh dear. Okay. So let's take a look at that. Oh yes. Okay, yes. We have finally damaged the specimen. There's powder of the specimen coming off, the color of the specimen. Oh yeah. So we scratched this with our steel, meaning that it is softer than a 5.5 but harder than a 3.5. So that gives us a range. So what are we going to do? We're going to document on our worksheet what the hardness range is. It's going to be harder than copper but softer than steel, and so that's going to give us a range of over 3.5 to under 5.5. Have you figured out what this is yet? We haven't done enough tests really, but this actually is a pretty common rock that you find in rock shops. But we've determined that it is between a 3.5, which leaves copper on it, and a 5.5 where it just barely starts to gouge into it. Does that mean the chapter's over? What are we going to do about the other stuff? Like the masonry bit and the crystals? We're going to have to try something else, huh? Let's try this specimen. We'll start from the beginning again, but I think it's a little bit harder than our last one. Maybe we can try to dig into it with a few more things. Alright, so we're going to get out its specimen worksheet so that we can document. And we're going to try to scratch it with our fingernail. Scratch, 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 scratch. I don't feel like I'm doing anything to it. In fact, I feel like I'm smoothing out where the other one screwed up my fingernail. Okay, let's take a look. Yeah, nothing. Just some fingernail glitter. Yep, nope, didn't do anything with the fingernail. Alright, next. Copper! And let's try to scratch it with the copper. And we'll take a look here. Oh, I managed to leave a bunch of copper on it. Look at that. Oh, it's sparkly. Now we're on to the steel. Scratchy, scratch, scratch, scratch. I don't feel like I'm doing anything. But I gotta look under the loop. We can't trust our eyeballs. Alright. I left steel on it. That's what I did. So this one, we got document harder than steel, harder than a 5.5. I wonder what it is. What do you guys think this one is, huh? We can break out the masonry drill bit. Now you see how that top metal looks different than this bottom metal? That's because that's that carbide tip. Okay, so we're gonna find a good space on here. Now this is an 8.5. So we're jumping big, 5.5 to 8.5. But we can refine it down. I'm gonna show you how. So we're gonna go ahead and try this masonry bit. Scratchy, scratchy, scratch. Oh, I'm definitely digging. Oh, I'm Zorro. Oh, you can see all that? I got into it with that. Ooh, oh yeah, that's rock dust. Okay, so we're below an 8.5 and above a 5.5. So what do? Well, this is where those other crystal specimens come in really handy. We're not going to use the sapphire because it's harder than the masonry bit, but we can try to use the topaz. And so we're going to take the topaz, find a new place to scratch, new clean place. Oh, I'm digging in. Okay, so we are softer than topaz. Let me take a look. Oh yeah, we got rock dust there. Yeah, it was right up here. So yep, so it's softer than topaz. So we're gonna document with our pencils, on our worksheet that we are softer than topaz, harder than steel. And topaz on our Mohs scale of hardness is an 8. So we're going to try quartz, which is a 7. Which is why I got this quartz crystal. Pick a clean spot that's not been scratched before. Now it feels like it's skating off of it. So it's going to be, it's about the same hardness as the quartz crystal. If this had a pointy bit, I might try scratching the quartz crystal, but this doesn't have a pointy bit for me to try to scratch the quartz, but the quartz is not scratching it. So we can safely assume that this is somewhere between a topaz and a quartz. And I know that this is a piece of really low-grade aquamarine, which is a beryl, and I believe between a 7 and an 8 on the Mohs scale of our hardness. Let's take a look at our handy-dandy book and confirm, because our memories, well, as humans, are generally terrible. Okay, so this might be really basic to some people, but some people might not really know how to use a reference book. So with this type of book, what I did first is I went to blue, because that's supposed to be a piece of aquamarine, and I didn't find beryl right away, and I was looking in the crystal structures. See how it has the crystal structure right by my finger? And so I was like, okay, well, what's another beryl? So I hopped over to emerald, and it gives me the page number for emeralds and beryl. Alright, and here we are over at beryl, and it gives me all the pages for the pictures, and it tells me all the deets about it. So beryl, 7.5 to 8. So that would be why it looked like it was kind of blunting this, but the topaz was able to get into it being lower grade aquamarine. That makes sense. That's why these books are so great. So what's my determination here? Aquamarine. So what's with the glass plate? How do we use that? Well, that's another way that when we have a harder material, we can see if it scratches the glass. So let's see if this guy, has anybody taken a guess as to what this could be yet? We've got a luster that is kind of waxy, not glassy though, a little bit resinous, and we have a hardness of a little under a steel nail. Let's try scratching the plate, which is a 5. It scratches the plate. So it is somewhere between a 5 and a 5.5. That limits the range of this one. Quartz. Oh, you could hear that one. Scratches the plate. Ooh, pardon me. Topaz. You can hear that one. Scratches the plate. And sapphire. Ooh, scratches the plate. Holy. These make terrible noises when they scratch the plate. Question is, does our steel scratch the plate? No. No. So the steel and the glass are about the same. So that's interesting. It's interesting that the steels can scratch this, but this scratches the glass. That talks about its tensile strength, meaning the steel can tear it apart, but it can also tear apart non-molecular silica. So, very interesting stuff to document. Just so you know, one of the biggest variations is the steel nail in hardness. I have it documented everywhere between a 5 and a 6.5 in my book. That was not a typo, and I should have gone into that in a little bit more detail. But steel, depending on what kind it is, has different hardnesses and different brittlenesses, or tensile strength. So this particular deck screw is a softer steel, closer to glass, so closer to a 5, not a 6.5. So that's another thing, is sometimes you have to, when using household items, determine the hardness of your household item. When against glass, this does not scratch. So we know that this guy is going to be a softer steel. We gotta keep in mind during all this, we're doing it for fun. This is rarely someone's job, and even when it is their job, like mine, I don't have to know this detailed. This is all evidence and information towards trying to get an end result of a description or you know, determination of what the mineral is. There are very few of us taking this class here who are going to be discovering world-class mines and making millions of dollars. We gotta remember this is a hobby. Hobbies are supposed to be fun, and the world varies. In fact, the hardness of copper can vary. The little tool that I'm going to send you, I will have hammered with a hammer, creating some crystals in it, making it actually a little harder than it would be had I not hammered it. So we need to allow for variations in nature. So that's pretty much it. Hardness is something where you can get really like down and nitty gritty about it, or you can take it kind of casually. Depending on the kind of rocks you find, there might only be one tool that you use to tell if it's hard or not. I ask a lot of people, can you scratch it with a pocket knife? When I was a kid, I was taught that that was roughly a 5. We now know that steel ranges essentially from a 5 to a 6.5. So it really depends on what, what type of material are you into. If you're looking for stuff to polish for lapidary, I recommend that you stick with stuff that's about as hard as steel. Sure, you can polish calcite, you really can. But is it going to last in the long term as like a daily wear stone? No. And in fact, this stone that I keep teasing you with gets made into jewelry. It is a 5, and it's not a good daily wear stone. It eventually will dull on you. So if you want to polish stones, and that's what the whole point of this is trying to identify rocks that are good candidates to polish and stay polished, try to scratch it with steel. Can't scratch it with steel, most likely day-to-day wear is not going to damage it unless it has a very low tensile strength, which we're going to get into with fracture, and also cleavage and crystal structure, which is coming up next. Thanks for sticking in here with me with hardness, and hope to see you for the next chapter.